it's Carrie. Today we are going to be going over a video that was requested way before I even had a booktube channel because my reading habits have been compared to RM or Namjoon of BTS's reading habits. So I thought I would finally do it. Thank you for everyone who recommended it and sent me his various reading lists. I'm going to be using this one, which I will translate below. So I had actually read a vast majority of these books, but I decided to pick a few that I have read, books that I need to reread, and books that I haven't read to talk about in today's video. Hopefully give you a few that you would want to pick out or just talk about in case you haven't had anybody to chat with. That being said, let's just jump on in. RM's reading recommendations. I look like a mess. I feel like a mess. Hi guys. Let me get cozy here so we can talk about some sad stuff. So I just got back from crying in public multiple times. The girls sitting next to me at the cafe were concerned. I'm going to talk about the books that I've read recently. What are we going to talk about first? Let's start with an easy one. Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. So if you know me, you know that Haruki Murakami is one of my favorite authors. I got a tattoo inspired by one of his characters back in 2013. If you want to know more about that, I'll put it up there. But yeah, Murakami and I go way back. To be quite honest, actually, Kafka on the Shore is not my favorite. So I'm gonna be real here. I didn't reread this in one day. If you look at the timestamps, I have already read this, so I felt as if I didn't need to reread it for this video, but I do want to talk about it because I get a lot of requests about Murakami videos. It's so difficult to describe the plot of a Murakami book because they sort of don't really have a plot, and that's a little bit part of the point. He kind of delves into like absurdism, magical realism, stuff like that. So there isn't always necessarily a solid beginning, middle, and end, but there's just something about the way that he writes. He creates this atmosphere that a lot of people, myself included, find themselves enjoying. I actually, rather than Kafka on the Shore, I actually find that I am able to digest his work better in the form of short stories. So he has a lot of short story collections. This is just the only one that I have right now. It is the Blind Willow Sleeping Woman one. Not necessarily my favorite. So many lines are underlined. I have actually every Murakami book ever, but they're all in my house. They're all in America. If you are interested in delving into it, I definitely would recommend starting with like The Elephant Vanishes. Is actually the first work of Murakami I ever read, and then once I started reading Wind Up Bird Chronicle, I thought I was losing my mind because the first chapter of Wind Up Bird Chronicle is actually a short story in The Elephant Vanishes. So I would personally recommend, if you want to get started, start with his short stories. Ironically, I also really like 1Q84, which is a ridiculously long book. So I'm kind of on both ends of the spectrum. For his two most famous ones, which I would say would be Kafka and Norwegian Wood, neither of those are my favorite, actually. I would just say if you didn't like one Murakami, try dipping your toe into another one. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. So happy reading. Hi guys, another day, another book. This time I am reading Human Acts by Han Kang. I got it out of the library. I started reading it last night. It's actually a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be. So I have to go across the city for a little job thingy. And I think I might be able to finish this on the subway to and from. Fingers crossed. I have read The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and I considered it one of my favorite books of 2018, whatever year I read it in. So I'm very excited to read this one. So let's hop on a train and read. 한승입니다. This is where we really get into my feels. We're gonna talk about Human Acts by Han. So as I said already, here, I'll expose myself here. I had read The Vegetarian a few years ago and I really enjoyed it. It actually reminded me a bit of Murakami's writing in that it's a little, I don't want to say experimental. Both writers look at things in ways that normal people don't. So their writing is makes you see points of views that you wouldn't have ever thought of. And so this particular book, Human Acts, takes place in the 1980s. It spans a lot of time, but it focuses on the 1980s where there was an uprising in a city called Gwangju here in Korea. And the dictator at the time decided to send soldiers down to quell the violence and killed hundreds, thousands of people. The numbers are still unclear because the government worked so hard for decades to hide the correct information. There's still this ongoing debate of whether it even happened, whether it was North Korea that did it, which is just ridiculous. For example, if you've ever heard anybody talk about like people from Jeollado being emotional and stupid, like kind of like the American like redneck or hillbilly stereotype, that was actually a stereotype created by the government to encourage this idea that people from Gwangju are just crazy and that, you know, oh, they're so emotional, they're always rioting, they're so violent, kind of to discredit the people living there. And unfortunately, it's a stereotype that survives to this day. Anyway, the book kind of follows different people. I actually, going into it, didn't know that it was going to have different points of view. So when the first point of view switched, I literally gasped. The eyes through which you see the story being told and the timeline in which you see it, it's just really, really hard to read. And I don't want to cry. I'm not gonna cry. And it also, a lot of times in film or in other literature, when they talk about the Gwangju uprising, you really see like the violence. You actually see like the tanks coming in and like these big sweeping heroic actions and stuff like that, which it did happen. But this story took a turn and kind of showed this quieter side of it and the aftermath. It was so much deeper and I don't know, I knew it was going to be a powerful and emotionally heavy book, and that's why I've kind of put off reading it for so long, but it exceeded my expectations. Literally, it just took these turns, and I'm not saying that there are plot twists. I'm just saying that she went to places that I wouldn't have thought she would have taken the story, and it was just so heartbreaking. It's a really, really difficult book to read. So yeah, I highly recommend it. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that history, I also made a video about films that are about real events that happened in Korea. So you can check that out and I talk about it a little bit more. But it's something that is still a hot topic to this day. Very important to learn about. Han, Human Acts. If you didn't like The Vegetarian, I think it's very different from The Vegetarian. So if you've read any of her previous work and you didn't connect with it, I would say still try Human Acts. It also took me 2 times. I tried reading it about a year ago and it just didn't click. I didn't get it. But it took me 1 day to read it now. So if you maybe tried it once and it didn't click with you, try it again. Yeah, Han, Human Acts. Hi guys, it is a hot and humid day in Seoul and we are heading to one of my favorite cafes to read and work in. Brought my laptop, but oh my god, cutest dog. Anyway, we are going to start reading Kim Ji-young, born in 1982, which I'm very excited about. It was a very hot topic here in Korea because it was seen as a feminist novel, and A lot of men did not like that. So I'm really excited to read it and get a coffee, get some air conditioning. Let's go. So this was actually the first book that I read out of the reading recommendations list, and I haven't seen the movie first and foremost, but I have heard a ton about this. As I said, this was kind of a scandalous book, a hot topic in Korea because it was seen as a feminist novel, and it kind of opened a lot of conversation, which I thought was really cool, so I decided to read it. I have heard whisperings of issues with the English translation, but I actually couldn't find any solid articles or anything about why people were complaining about the English translation. I did not read this in Korean, I read this in English. I don't know about that, but if you want to talk about it in the comments, let me know what was up, what was the difference. But basically, Kim Ji-young, born in 1982, is about just this woman, Kim Ji-young. She was born in 1982, and it just goes through her life. And what is kind of extraordinary about this book is that it's so ordinary. Her life, like from beginning to where this book ends, is so normal for Korea, for Korean women. And so the book was almost, for me, I hate to say this, but like the book almost wasn't interesting to read because it was so normal. And I'm not saying that I've ever lived through any of this. I think that much of this book was really, really unique to the Korean woman experience. But there are just so many things in here. If you're a woman living anywhere, you've been through so many of these just weird instances that women have to go through. So I think this was an important book. Like I said, it wasn't the most interesting for me to read, but I think it's really important culturally just because there are so many women who, because their lives are so ordinary, they don't talk about it. Seeing their ordinary life be put into a work of literature and have it be an international bestseller, I can see why women here became so attached to it. It's a non-exaggerated look at what the typical woman born in 1980 will go through. The last sentence in this book is just like gut-wrenching and so frustrating. As much as it wasn't like the most amazing book to read, I do think that it is immensely important just as like a cultural asset for people to be able to look at this and know exactly how women lived and all the things that they had to go through. So yeah, I definitely would recommend reading it. To me, it wasn't like a life-changing book or anything, but again, I do think it's important to have it, to have this record, to be able to see it on paper, see an ordinary, extraordinary life on paper. So yes. Okay, this was a reread. I always call it Demian. So this is a book by Herman Hesse. How do I explain this? So it basically follows the main character who lives kind of a perfect sheltered life, and it goes through from his childhood into adulthood, showing how that facade of this perfect home life kind of shatters, and he starts to question things, he starts to revolt, he feels like guilt and anger and confusion when it comes to, like, it almost feels like his parents have lied to him by creating this perfect life for him. you know, it's a really perfect example of a coming of age story, I guess, realizing that the world is a complex and scary place. It's written in quite an easy way and it's a very quick read. So I would say definitely if you haven't read this before and you are interested in kind of a more philosophical look at how we see the world, how our realities are formed. And I was talking to Kurt and I don't know if I just lived a sheltered life. I actually hadn't heard of Hermann Hesse until I got my hands on this book. And he is actually quite famous in Korea. It's not like everybody has read this book. This wasn't mandatory reading in high school, but he is a very well-known author here. So it's quite easy to find a copy if you're in Korea. But yeah, definitely it's a quick read, but it brings up a lot of interesting questions, as do all of these books. So yes, Demian by Hermann Hesse. And so I just got back from crying in a cafe because I wasn't actually going to read this essay because for some reason I thought that the essay was a lot longer, or the book was a lot longer. I just finished reading When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. Oh guys, it's only like 100 pages. So it was actually a lot shorter than I thought it was. This was another book that I picked up, tried reading it, did not click with me, and I kind of was like, I'm not gonna read this book, but here I am. This book is a nonfiction. It is a memoir about Dr. Paul Kalanithi, who is a neurosurgeon. He's really interested in literature and philosophy and science and how they kind of meet and what is the meaning of life. And he just has so many questions about like what makes us tick, what makes us us. Is it our brains? Is it, you know, the things we create, etc. It's not a spoiler to say that he actually gets cancer at a very young age. And so he is kind of using this book to reflect on his experience and his relationship with death through his whole life. And like I said, it's very short, but it's really, it gives you so much to think about. And I think if anybody is afraid of death, it can be quite helpful. I don't know why my throat is closing up. I'm not gonna cry in this video. Yeah, I think it talked about life and death and illness and medicine and what is life, what life is worth living, what life is worth saving. It just posed a lot of interesting questions. It shed a lot of interesting light on things that I've been lucky enough not to have to think about. So yeah, I mean, it was a really quick read for me. Like I said, it was like 100 something pages, but hits ya. I think the major theme that we're seeing in this list of recommendations, at least the ones that I've chosen, a lot of questions about not just the meaning of life, but like what are we, like what's the meaning of us? I think it's a little bit different. If I get brain surgery and I lose this little piece and now I can no longer speak to you, I can't express myself with language, am I still me? All of these books have a very philosophical foundation, a lot of philosophical questions being raised. It's about life and the soul. I am done. This was my last book. I can't take any more. I'm gonna wrap this up with some recommendations of my own. Okay, I'm here with my recommendations for RM because we know Namjoon watches my channel. Kidding, by the way, just a joke. But if you like the books that he recommends, if you like what I've been talking about, I have a few recommendations of my own that are a little bit related. I think they're of the same vein. Let's just dive in. I always try to be quick when I talk about books, but we know that doesn't ever really happen. First up, How Music Works by David Byrne. So I was raised on the Talking Heads. Thank you, Mom. And the crazy thing about David is that not only is he a great musician that created so much amazing music, he is still so involved in the music scene. Like, even though he's a huge name, he will just go to like these tiny clubs in New York and just listen to whoever's there, hoping to find like the next new sound. He just really, this man like lives and breathes music. He literally just talks about like how sound even started, how he like performs. It just has so many wonderful references. It talks about the music industry, like literally how does music work? Why does it make us feel the way that it feels, etc. So if you just want to pick this up for funsies, I think it's also an audiobook. Love it. Next up is my only work of fiction, and I feel like you guys, if you like Murakami, you might have already read this one, but it is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. And how do I describe this book? It has very similar themes to the books that we already talked about of what is the meaning of life, what makes us, what is a soul. Without spoiling it, it is essentially about a group of kids who are at a school and they are constantly being pushed to create art and kind of like explore their heart. This sounds so bad. There is a key detail which I can't explain that makes this so crucial and interesting. It's a little bit science fiction, it's a little bit futuristic, but it's set in this like British boarding school, so it feels very much like an old kind of fairy tale book that you might have read as a kid. It just poses a lot of really interesting questions about what makes a human human, what makes a soul a soul. I wish I could explain this in more detail, but I don't want to ruin it for any of you guys. There's also a wonderful film. Yeah, it's fabulous. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I've talked about both of these before. You're going to hear about them all the time. This is two different collections by The Moth. If you don't know what The Moth is, it is an organization that all over the world, they have these like meetups and they have a certain theme, and then all these people come and speak on this theme. And the only rule is that you have to tell something true. So it ends up being people of all walks of life who have been through so many different things. They all just end up sharing these stories, and they can range from being like a page to being 10 pages. They're very short, but they, I don't know, open your eyes. I think the last time I mentioned it for the purpose of regaining faith in humanity at a time like this, and I really believe so. It just kind of reminds you that we're all living complex, wonderful, scary, horrific, beautiful lives. And yeah, they are The Moth, All These Wonders, and Occasional Magic. And I believe there's also a podcast, which I will look it up and I will link down below. I've never listened to the podcast, I've only read the books. This is not the last time you'll be seeing these, I'm sure, on this channel, but there they are. And last but not least, I've talked about this book a lot. It is The Hidden Life of Trees, What They Feel, How They Communicate, Discoveries from a Secret World. So this was actually written by a man who worked in the forestry industry. So he would be like cutting down trees, and he started to observe the ways that trees behaved, and so then he started to actually study it. We often think of trees, like most of us know, oh yeah, they're the lungs of the world. They, I don't know, produce oxygen, but they are so much more complex. They can communicate through their root system. They can communicate through chemicals in the air. I sound like a conspiracy theorist here. If you are interested in nature and psychology, I don't know, I think humans have this problem where we think that we're kind of the ultimate species, that like we are the best at communicating and feeling and helping each other and having a community. But even a little tree, even a little mushroom can do such complex and wonderful things. And so this was just really eye-opening and fun to read as someone who already loves trees. It doesn't necessarily pose philosophical questions towards you, but if you read it, you can't help but ask them yourself. So I think that this is a wonderful book that would be right up yours or Namjoon's alley. And so that is my list. Thank you again to everybody who recommended that I do this. Like I said, I've definitely read a lot of the books on that list, but it was nice to reread a few, pick up some new ones, cry a lot, have a lot of philosophical discussions with myself. So yeah, I will link the lists down below. There are a couple different ones, and I will also translate the main one. Anyway, I hope that you guys got something out of this, and I will see you guys next time. All right, have a wonderful day. Bye.